We tend to think of string instruments as old instruments. When we look at a violin, viola, or cello, we assume it's the same that it has been for the past couple hundred years. String instruments have actually evolved a lot, and when you hear someone talking about a Baroque cello or a Baroque violin, it's actually a slightly different instrument than the modern counterparts we see today. I'm here with both my Baroque and my modern cello, and I'm going to talk a little bit about the constructional differences of each. The most jarring difference of the Baroque cello from the modern cello is the lack of end pin. You can see here when looking at the bottom of my Baroque cello, I actually have just a little button here on the bottom, so no end pin at all. So when you play the Baroque cello, you actually just hold it rather than having a stick coming out of the bottom that supports the instrument. Another major difference that we see on the Baroque cello and on all Baroque string instruments is gut strings. Modern instruments typically use steel strings, which are more stable under weather and humidity changes, and they also make a more projecting cutting sound. In the Baroque time, they made strings with what were available to them, which was basically animal parts. Gut strings have a completely different sound than a steel string, and they can't project quite as much, but the sound and character is what attracts many Baroque players to these strings. Another major difference among string instruments is the length of the fingerboard. If we look at the Baroque cello and the modern cello side by side, you can see that the Baroque cello's fingerboard is much shorter, and there's a bigger distance between the end of the fingerboard and the bridge. This is true on the violin and viola as well, and it's mostly because in the Baroque period, the repertoire really didn't call for super high positions. You weren't generally playing all the way up here the way we are in later Romantic repertoire. So they actually didn't need those last few inches of fingerboard. It came later to facilitate playing even higher on our instruments. There are some other differences that were sort of made just for modern convenience. For example, fine tuners. At the top of the tailpiece, you'll find small knobs used for tuning the strings for convenience on the modern cello. But in the Baroque days, they just hadn't invented this type of thing yet. We would just tune using the large pegs, which is what most violinists do now, but cellists are certainly not used to using the larger pegs for tuning. But you get used to it like anything else. Another difference is the angle of the fingerboard in comparison to the body of the instrument. So looking at my Baroque cello, you can see that the fingerboard is almost parallel with the body of the instrument, not a super drastic curve. When we look at my modern cello, you can see that the fingerboard actually curves away from the body of the instrument much more. This is more of a drastic angle here. This basically just creates more tension in the instrument, and more tension means more projection. In general, instruments were changing over time to be able to play in larger concert halls and really project sound all the way to the back. Whereas in the Baroque period, most of the venues that instruments were being played in were fairly small, like living rooms, and they didn't need quite as much cutting, precise, loud sound as we do now in larger concert halls. Another major difference between the modern cello and the Baroque cello is the bow. Here's my modern bow. You can see that I have a fairly squared off tip of the bow and a fairly large frog. And when I look at the bow, I can see that the stick actually curves slightly inward towards the hair. And this bow is basically designed to get a smooth, even sound throughout the whole bow stroke and to not have too much of a weight difference between the tip and the frog. When I take my Baroque bow, you can see the tip is much pointier, which makes it a lot lighter, and the frog isn't quite as large as well. If you look at the curve of this bow, you can see that the stick actually curves away from the hair, which makes a very different sound and articulation when we draw the bow on the string. Basically, this bow is designed to have a swell of sound in the middle, where the most tension is, and to have a natural decay, or decrescendo, at the tip. The lighter tip also makes the up bows a little bit softer than the down bows, just naturally with the weight of the bow. Instead of striving for everything to be the same and to be kind of equal, the Baroque period really played around with this inequality of notes, and the bow was designed to do that. I'm going to draw an open A string on my modern cello using my heavy modern bow on a steel string so you can hear the sound. Now I'm going to draw an open A on my Baroque cello using my lighter bow on a gut string, and you're also going to notice that the pitch is different as well. So right away you can hear a different sound quality in the string. And you can also hear that my up bows are a little bit lighter than my down bows because of this bow. Now to play some more notes on the modern cello. instructional differences that we can't actually see in the instruments. Like, for example, the Baroque cello has a shorter bass bar, which is inside the instrument, than the modern cello, and that also comes down to projection. A shorter bass bar is not going to project sound as much as a longer one. The whole idea around using an appropriate instrument for the time period is really understanding what the composer himself was working with. If we use a cello or a violin that's more similar to one that Bach would have seen, we have a better idea of what he was trying to achieve in his music. We also understand some of the limitations and some of the assets of the instrument. Instruments have evolved for a number of reasons, but I think if we're going to be playing older repertoire, it really makes sense to be using the same kind of equipment that we would have seen at that time. For me, using a Baroque instrument really helps bring this repertoire to life, as we have all the sort of quirks and charm of this music built into our instruments. If you're a modern string player who's never tried a Baroque instrument, I urge you to try it out, see if you can borrow someone's, or perhaps get your hands on a Baroque bow to get a feeling for the different weight. You can even buy a set of gut strings and try it on your modern instrument. There are a lot of gateways into trying this sound, and I think a lot of people find that playing Baroque repertoire on these instruments is a lot more enjoyable. Thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to subscribe to my channel, as I do new videos on Baroque music every week. If you want to learn more about period instruments and Baroque style, I have a whole playlist of instructional videos to get you started. If you'd like to see this channel grow and you'd like to support, you can become my patron on Patreon.